Hello everyone. Today we'll have the second session of the best Christmas present in the world. This is the first chapter of Class 8 NCRT book. Now, in the first session, we read about we read the first part of the chapter, and we had almost reached the middle of the second part. Let's do a quick recap about what we had read. Okay, so this chapter is about Christmas. It's about a present that's very important, and the setting is situated at in two different times. Okay, so this chapter opens with the fact that this person finds a roll top desk in which he finds a letter, and the second part of the chapter deals with the letter, which is set in 1914 during the time of war, and the third part again comes back to the present of the chapter. Okay, let's do a quick recap. So the narrator, Michael, he finds a roll top desk in a junk shop. It has scotch marks, it's burnt, it has water damage, but he always wanted a roll top desk, so he decides to buy it and repair it. Okay, so he begins to work on it on a Christmas Eve. The fact that he's doing it on Christmas Eve is important because all the action that's happening in this chapter happens around Christmas. So he removes the roll top, he finds a secret drawer. He has to open one shelf, as you can see in the picture, and inside he finds a secret drawer, and inside that was a tin box with a paper taped on it. Look at this picture. Okay, now what did this note, this paper say? It said, Jim's last letter received January 25th, 1915, to be buried with me when the time comes. This tells you that this letter was important for the person who had received it. He or she wanted to be buried with it. When they die, they wanted the letter to be buried with them. Okay, so it means that it has some emotional value. Okay, so now this person is very curious and he opens the letter. He shouldn't have, it was somebody else's personal letter, but still he opens it. And inside the box was an envelope which said Mrs. Jim MacPherson, 12 Copper Beeches. Now we know that this person who wanted to be buried with the letter was Mrs. Jim MacPherson. She lived at 12 Copper Beeches, Bridport, Dorset, and the date was 26 December 1914, the day after Christmas. Okay, now this person has opened the letter, he's reading it. The second part of the chapter tells you what is in the letter. We read this last time as well. Dearest Connie, he starts and says that he's in a happy frame of mind and he wants to tell her something that has happened. Okay, so on the Christmas Eve, they're standing in their trenches and the Germans, the word Fritz is used for Germans as we discussed last time, they were waving a white flag. Now, as most of you pointed out, a white flag means peace. Okay, so they're basically signaling that they don't want to fight. So they come out of their trenches and they wish them, who are them? The British soldiers. Happy Christmas, Tommy. Tommy is a slang word used for British soldiers, just like Fritz is a slang word for German soldiers. So initially they are scared. They think that the German soldiers are tricking them. So they tell each other, keep your heads down. It's a trick. I told the men. Okay. So they initially think that it's a trick, but eventually they realize that it wasn't a trick. Gradually, all of them come out, they sit with each other, they talk to each other. Look at this. You cannot imagine, dearest Connie, my feelings as I looked into the eyes of the Fritz officer who approached me hand outstretched. They're introducing themselves to each other, and when they start talking, they realize that they're very similar to each other. They're not different people. In the middle of the war, we were making peace. As you read the chapter further, you would realize that nobody wants war. War, uh, maybe it concerns countries as nations, as boundaries and borders are important, but people who fight the war, they really don't want to be fighting the war. Okay, we had read all this. Jim McPherson, this person who's writing the letter, and Hans Wolf, the German officer, they talk to each other. The Jim gets to know that he knew English. He knew about his favorite writer. He knew that he played cello in the orchestra. We agreed about everything, and he was my enemy. We agreed about everything means they're very similar, they like similar things, they're not having arguments, but yet they were enemies because they were fighting on the different sides. Okay, so this is where we had stopped last time. We'll read in detail from this point onwards. Then someone, I don't know who, bought out a football. Great coats were dumped in piles to make goalposts, and the next thing we knew, it was Tommy against Fritz out in the middle of no man's land. Remember, they were wearing khaki and grey coats, overcoats, so their coats were dumped, they were put together in little heaps piles to make goalposts. In football, there's a goal post where the goal is scored. So using those courts, like when you play and you don't have a goal post, you can use your shoes, you can use stones to make it. So here these people had used courts to make that goal post. And in the middle of no man's land we discussed last time, right? So there in the middle, the Germans and the British soldiers are playing a football match. Hans Wolf and I looked on and cheered. Looked on, they're looking at it and cheering, yay! Clapping our hands and stamping our feet to keep out the cold as much as anything. Okay, so they're also engaging in a little physical activity, clapping hands, jumping on their feet because it's very cold and they need to keep warm. There was a moment when I noticed our breaths mingling in the air between us. When it's cold and you speak something, or even when you're breathing, you can see your breath, right? So he says that he could see the breath mingling in the air, mixing in the air. Hans Wolf's breath and Jim McPherson's breath, they were mixing together in the air. He saw it too and smiled. This mixing indicates that they are coming together, they're coming close to each other. Jim McPherson, he said after a while, I think this is how we should resolve this war. A football match. No one dies in a football match, no children are orphaned, no wives become widows. This is an important line here. He says this is how we should be fighting wars. Okay, instead of people killing each other, because when a man dies in war, the whole family suffers. Children are orphaned, wives become widows. So this shouldn't be happening. They could have a peaceful match and decide the outcome of the war. Whoever wins the match wins the war. So Jim says, I'd prefer cricket. Cricket is important in England, so he doesn't like football that much. He says, I would like cricket, I told him. Then we Tommies could be sure of winning probably. So he says, if we play cricket, then we will definitely win. We laughed at that, and together we watched the game. Sad to say, look at this picture here. Khaki coats and grey coats, different uniforms. The khaki and the grey is not shown here because the coats are used for goalposts. This is the no man's land, this is the border, right? So here they're playing a cricket match, and you can see the symbol here. This shows you that this is the German army and this is the British army. Okay, where were we? Sad to say, Connie, Fritz won 2 goals to 1. Jim says that like it was sad that they won, we lost, but as Hans Wolf generously said, our goal was wider than theirs, so it wasn't quite fair. Even in this game, there's no animosity. They're friends, okay? So he won, the Germans won, but they said that their goal was wider. They had more space, so it was not fair that they won. This is really heart touching because they're enemies, and here they're taking each other's side. The time came, and all too soon, when the game was finished. The schnapps and the rum and the sausage had long since run out, and we knew it was all over. So, all the party that they were doing had to come to an end because the day was setting and the game had finished, and all their drinks and things to eat had also finished. I wished Hans well and told him I hoped he would see his family again soon. He's wishing that you should be able to go back home soon, that the fighting would end and we all could go home. I think that is what every soldier wants on both sides, Hans Wolff said. Take care, Jim McPherson. I shall never forget this moment, nor you. They would remember each other always. He saluted and walked away from me slowly, unwillingly. He doesn't want to go. Look at this line again. That is what every soldier wants. What does every soldier want? To be able to go back home to their families, and on both the sides. No soldier wants to die in war. Moving on, he turned to wave just once and then became one of the hundreds of grey coated men drifting back towards their trenches. So he said bye. He looked at him and then turned and walked away. There were hundreds of men going back towards their trenches. I showed you a picture of trenches last time, if you remember. That night, back in our dugouts, we heard them singing a carol and singing it quite beautifully. It was Stille Nacht, Silent Night. The English people call it Silent Night, whereas the Germans were calling it Stille Nacht. Okay, so even their carols are so similar. Our boys gave them a rousing chorus of Wild Shepherd's Watch. So, when they were singing Silent Nights, the British soldiers gave them a chorus of Wild Shepherd's Watch. Chorus is background singers. Okay, so when they were doing the main lines, these people, the British soldiers, gave them a chorus. We exchanged carols for a while and then we all fell silent. We had our time of peace and goodwill, a time I will treasure as long as I live. This experience that Jim McPherson has, he says it was a time of peace and goodwill. There was no fighting, they wanted good for each other. It was a time that he will treasure as long as he lived. He valued it. Dearest Connie, by Christmas time next year, this war will be nothing but a distant and terrible memory. I know from all that happened today how much both armies long for peace. So he says that next year, next Christmas, there will be no war. The war would have ended. It will only be a bad memory because both the armies longed for peace. They don't want to fight. So this war will end very soon. We shall be together again soon. I am sure of it. This line, I feel that this is such a sad line because this is Jim's last letter. He dies soon after this. He is not able to get together with his wife. Okay, with this we end the second part of the chapter. Then we have the third part, which is a it's a 3-page part. The third part comes back to the present, wherein this person who found the letter in the drawer, the narrator, he decides to go and give the letter to Mrs. Macpherson. We will take this up in the third part. Thank you for joining. If you have any questions, please WhatsApp me individually, or you can put them down here on the YouTube page itself. I will try to answer all of them as and when I can. Thank you.